Hello, Garland. Sound. Hello, Garland Nixon here. And there is definitely a crisis of leadership in the West. Let's talk. Testing 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully, I have sound. So I'm going to look on the chat, and I am going to hope that the people in the chat get back to me and let me know that I have sound. I don't really have any sound feedback out of my ears. So everybody in the chat, let me know. What we're talking about today is the obvious crisis of leadership. I see some people saying hello, but I don't see anybody saying whether or not we have sound yet. So I'm going to suspect that we do because nobody said I can't hear anything. All right, so let's move forward. The crisis of leadership that I'm talking about in the West. Let's do this. Let's start by looking at some of the leaders in the West, talk a little bit about them, and talk about what I mean when I say crisis of leadership. Puppets, evil puppets, and clowns. So a leader has a couple of duties, has a couple of jobs, and it depends on what kind of a leader, right? But a leader of a politician, a leader of a country, right? There's two ways you can go. One being that, in my opinion, in democracy, right, in what we consider a supposedly bottom-up politics. Bottom up politics. That means the people at the bottom, the working class, the working poor, which are the masses. When you say the bottom, remember, you're not talking about the wealthy and the upper crust because they're part of the masses. They're part of the masses. What in the world's going on here? Okay, I must have waited a little long to go live on Rockfin, but we're rolling. But the masses themselves are always supposed to be, you're supposed to have a very healthy working class. And in a economically healthy society, the largest part of that society would be what? Would be the working class in an economically healthy society, right? But all too often in the world, a lot of the societies, there's a huge contingents of very, very poor people, of peasants. Then you have a small working class, the commoners in a feudal system, and then a tiny, tiny noble class, which is the elite ruling class. And unfortunately, what you end up with is the elite ruling class in some form or fashion, ruling over, the top 1% ruling over the bottom 99%. And you have a dysfunctional society. I believe that's what we have. And so a leader could be the people choose this, what they believe to be, and I won't use the word smartest, smart refers to intellect, the wisest amongst them. The wisest. Remember, there's a difference between pure intellect. You can be a very smart person, but not wise. We've all known people who were very, very intellectually, as far as brain computing power, right? They could, in the snap of an eye, they could do all kinds of math and read something and pass tests and all these kinds of things. But when it came to wisdom, just wasn't there. One of the things that I think is important there's a great book called Emotional Intelligence. And I believe that wisdom is that cross section is where intellect, right? To me, wisdom, you've got intellect. That's a smart person. And that to me is the smallest part of it. You've got intellect, right? You've got an emotional intelligence where you understand how other people feel. There's a certain amount of empathy, even for your adversaries. For your adversaries, you use strategic empathy. In other words, if you have an adversary, you understand their motivations, what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, their reasons for doing it, but not assigning a reason to them that works for your narrative, but actually understanding in the context of how they see the world, right? What their perspective is. Empathy, strategic empathy, right? So you bring those things together. And then you have wisdom. Now something happens and you can think, what's in the best interest of the people that I'm leading? based on my adversaries, what decision should I make wherein I can have kind of an indivisible outcome where I make out okay and my adversaries at least make out okay enough that they won't want to go to war with me, that they won't want to settle this thing with some level of violence or things like that, or confrontation, right? So I can make a decision as a leader. My people are happy, my adversaries aren't ready to go to war, and everything in between. I maintain, and here's an important word: stability. A wise leader seeks stability. That's what they want. They want things to be stable. They want their adversaries not to attack them. They want a stable, at minimum, a stable peace, working towards a solid peace, but at minimum, some level of stable peace where me and my adversaries agree we're not going to go to war, we're not going to fight. We can even do business, things of that nature, right? So the bottom line is what you want is a wise leader first and foremost that takes everything into account, right? And so you can choose option a wise leader that you say this person is wise and they represent us and they know what we understand. They understand what we want. They're going to go forward and make decisions utilizing their wisdom as their moral, ethical, political compass. Option A. Option B is this: you simply do in your country, whatever, what would be considered direct kind of democracy. In a way, I consider a direct democracy. Some people don't. And here's what I mean. You choose a leader, and the leader directly represents the people. In other words, somebody says, that's referendums, as an example. Somebody says, do you think we should legalize marijuana? Now, wise leader says, well, how will that affect our stability? What do the people want? On and on and on. Special interest, they take everything into account and make a decision, right? As opposed to a more direct form of leadership where it would be a referendum. They come to leader President Nixon and they say, President Nixon, they want to legalize marijuana. What shall we do? And President Nixon says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a referendum and let the people vote, right? So now you don't need the person who has as much wisdom and stability as the person who wants to directly, who feels accountable. So I think that's the word I'm looking for. Both leaders ideally would be seeking stability. One would be seeking stability through the use of wisdom, empathy, strategic empathy, knowledge of history, intellect, bringing in a very, very smart advisors, all of those things, right? That's how they're going to work for stability and the best interest of their country or whatever group they're leading. The other one says, I'm going to directly reflect what the people want as closely as I can. So I'm going to hold referendums. I'm going to have town halls. I'm going to ask the people. I'm going to look at the polls. And I see the polls say 70% of the people want X, of getting X. I do a referendum, on and on and on, right? So that's two ways of leading. Well, A, you're the wisdom. The people trust you because you're wise. B, the people trust you because you ask them or you consult the people, even if it's an indirect consultation by consulting the polls. Okay. Those are great leaders. There you go. That's what most people want and expect. And the outcome that they expect is what? Stability. That's the word that people expect. So we talk about leaders before we get into the individual leaders. I just want to talk about leadership a little bit, right? People want stability. What do they want? Get up in the morning, go to work, do whatever, and pursue their lives, pursue their dreams, pursue their happiness because there's stability. They're not concerned that there's going to be a war. They're not concerned that there's going to be some kind of an economic crash. They're not concerned with that because their leader, is pursuing stability. Whatever manner they use, whatever avenue they use to get there, people want a leader that pursues stability, one way, shape, or form. And there can be time of war. A leader has to be able to, if they truly believe that and they see the threat, then they've got to be able to convince their people there is a threat. The only way we can maintain stability is to go to war. If we don't go to war, it's going to be much worse. These people are going to attack us. They've got us surrounded. We got to go to war. Sometimes a leader does that. Ideally, a leader should exhaust all means of diplomatic diplomatic resolutions before they go to war. But that's the bottom line. That's so let's get started there with leadership, right? What does Garland think a leadership is, right? A leader is, and that would be a wise person who wants to be accountable to the citizenry and wants to reflect the needs of the citizenry, the beliefs, the culture, the traditions of the citizenry, and the history of the citizenry, takes all of that into account, and also wants to ensure that they're at minimum, as Abraham Lincoln said, a good president can't get too far out in front of public opinion. So they got to take into account public opinion. There you go. It's almost indisputable. It's disputable among some people, but Abraham Lincoln, if you look what he accomplished, was a great president. And one of the things he said, you can't get out too far in front of public opinion, right? Okay, got us. We got some baselines here. We got something started, right? Let's move forward to what we have. What do we have? Do we have leaders who are wise? Combination of intellect, right? Knowledge of history, and which your knowledge of history and data is, these are the things that I need. These is this information I need to make quality decisions. And empathy and strategic empathy. I want to understand my adversaries, and I want to have empathy for the people in my country, and even the people in my adversaries' country. They're just working stiffs. They want to make a living and live their lives too, right? Bring that together. That's what you want. Let's look what we got. Joe Biden. Let's start with the U.S. Joe Biden, because really you have to start and end with the U.S. in a way, because the rest of them are just puppets and clowns. They're just doing what they're told. So they're going to follow Biden. So let's start with Biden. What do we have? Leadership crisis in the United States. It's obvious. So what happened? Let's start with how we got here, right? We got here. We get all these problems, all this instability is due to a lack of democracy. Let's not forget what happened. Biden ran against Bernie Sanders. I'm not here to say Bernie Sanders is good, bad, or indifferent. In 2016, I was a supporter of Bernie Sanders in 2016 because I thought that's different. I want different. I wanted different. And that's why I understand people who supported Trump. I understand conservatives who supported Trump. I wouldn't. My ideology is different, but I understand they wanted something different too, right? I even had on one of my radio shows in DC, I will never forget it. I got a caller one time. I get people all over the ideological spectrum, and the person said, "Look, I'm voting for Trump." I'm like, "Why is that?" "Because I've been lied to, took so many times. I'm going to try something different." I said, "Well, if you think Trump's going to tell you the truth, good luck with that." I said, "But, brother, I understand where you're coming from. Understand that so many of these liberals are like, you supported Trump, you're a Nazi. What about the Azov Battalion? Love them." A little bit of inconsistency there. So what I'm getting at is this. During and this is the root of this crisis, maybe. Biden's running. The Democratic Party did everything they could again in 2020. The Democratic Party and the national security state, et cetera. This machine did everything it could to protect itself by making sure that nobody, such as Bernie, somebody they didn't want, was going to have a Tulsi Gabbard, other people that were outside of this spectrum of, warmongering neocons and neoliberal puppets. They made sure that to thwart democracy. In fact, and you might have heard this before, it was widely reported, and Barack Obama never denied it. It was widely reported that Barack Obama said, if it looks like Bernie's going to run away with it, we'll have to step in. Well, what do you have there? What do you have there, right? Come forward today. Remember, Annalena Baerbock recently said, "I don't care what the people of Germany want, we're going to support Ukraine." Same thing. It's a reflection of where we are in Western democracy, and I use that word lightly. So that's a long way of saying this. During the run up to 2022, during the primary elections, which is where it really happens, that's where the thievery really happens, right? During that period of time, Joe Biden was not a viable candidate, but his party took used extra democratic methods to get him elected. They cheated. It's so clear, obvious they cheated, and they knew that Joe Biden wasn't much of was just a shell of the old Joe Biden, and the old Joe Biden was a piece of shit. So they knew they didn't have much. But in their perspective, Bernie is an outsider. He's not one of us. He's going to do things that we don't like, and we got too many skeletons in our closet. What happens if Bernie becomes president and he finds out that we got, biological research labs all over the place, and God only who knows what's going on there, right? If he finds out some of the things we're doing, Bernie's not part of the clique, he might not buy it. He might not like it. He may say, let's do something different. And remember, even Trump, when they said, hey, the JFK stuff has to be opened up and shown, right? 70 years is gone, whatever. The law says you've got to share the information from JFK, and of course, being the guy who sadly the Trump supporters thought Trump was some kind of a great leader and he was going to push back against the system. Trump said, nah, I don't think we're showing it to people, right? So I think what we're looking at here is a situation where Joe Biden and the Democratic Party thwarted democracy in the first place to ensure that Biden won, with no regard for his competency, with no regard for his ability, nothing. It was simply, we have to stop Bernie. What do we have to stop Bernie? And they looked over there and they said, man, we got Biden, but he's a piece of shit. Oh, well, that's all we got. That's what we'll go with. So they put Biden in, and here's what you got. A guy that's wandering around shaking hands with the invisible man. But that's what they chose. They would prefer that over Bernie Sanders, simply because Bernie's not part of the gang. Not Bernie. Simply, like, we don't have to get into Bernie. Bernie, folds every time like a cheap chair. But bottom line is, Bernie's not part of the game, and he might say or do something they don't like. Anybody who's not a totally bought in to the neoconservative, neoliberal game cannot be a leader. That ain't happening. So there was an action that was taking outside of democracy to ensure that when it came time to vote for president, that people only had some form of John McCain to vote for. So now that's up against Trump. Off we go. And that's where you end up with Joe Biden, an incompetent guy. But ask you this: Joe Biden is he wise? Well, no. In fact, I know somebody that worked for Joe Biden as a congressional aide, and they were like, whatever it was, congressional senatorial aide, and they said, and this is what you hear over and over: he ain't all that bright. He's not an intellectual person. He's not smart. But they didn't choose him. What they were looking for was not intellect. What they were looking for was compliance. Somebody who knew how to play the game and they didn't have to know anything. They're just willing to say yes, sir, and do what they're told and go along with the narrative, right? And keep in mind, where Joe Biden come from? Delaware. Delaware is like the Cyprus of the United States. It's where you can start a corporation with you don't have to have a residency in Delaware. So anybody from anywhere can start a company. That's where every crooked company, every shell company, you name it, that's done in the United States, it's all done in Delaware. Then you have all these credit card companies out of Delaware, et cetera. So Delaware is a home for crooked corporations and all kind of corporate chicanery. That's where Joe Biden comes from. He actually is the perfect person for them, right? So you get Joe Biden. Now, talk about strategic empathy. Does Joe Biden have strategic empathy? What does that require? It requires understanding your adversaries, understanding their history, their traditions, their people, etc. Right? Well, in the neoliberal order, in the neoconservative world order, strategic empathy is frowned upon. Why is that? Because they live off narratives. You've probably heard me say this before. In a psychological saying in psychology, neurotics build castles in the sky, psychotics live in them, right? The neocons simply, they build that narrative. Putin's whatever, doesn't matter. Putin's a fill in the blank. Assad is a fill in the blank. Maduro is a fill in the blank. Whoever that is considered an adversary, which is always going to be this. It's always going to be a country that wants to be independent and sovereign and won't go along with what the U.S. empire says. They're going to be the evil person. So what happens is you're now looking at a political environment where people say, What's important is not that we have strategic empathy and understanding of our potential adversaries and adversaries. Something far, far different. It's that we create a narrative of who they are. Think about it. It's the same thing that they do in politics. If Garland Nixon runs, they decide, what are we going to call Garland? No, he's an anti-Semite. That's the plan, right? Let's start painting him as an anti-Semite. And they come up with a grand plan. Jeremy Corbyn, a grand plan, and they all work together to paint him as an anti-Semite. They don't want to know who Jeremy Corbyn is. They don't care who Jeremy Corbyn is. Their plan is to create a narrative, create a Jeremy Corbyn. So when people hear the name Jeremy Corbyn, they'll see this that they've created. They have to pretend like that's the real Jeremy Corbyn. It's a straw man Jeremy Corbyn, and boom, there you go. It's straw man politics. It is the opposite of strategic empathy. The opposite of strategic empathy is straw man politics. Hey, Putin is fill in the blank. He's the richest man in the world and the most evil man in the world. And he's the craziest man in the world. And he's the smartest man in the world. And he's powerful, the most powerful person ever. He rules everything, but he's also weak, real weak. But he rules with an iron fist, but the people around him might kill him any day. And he's tough, but he's got Parkinson's and cancer, whatever. Contradictory assertions about Putin, but it doesn't matter because they're not about Putin. They're about manipulating the people that they're creating this narrative about Putin to. Right? It's not about when they tell you who Putin is, when they tell you who Assad is, when they tell you who Maduro is, has nothing to do with Assad, Maduro, or Putin. It has to do with you as an American or whoever, or Spaniard or whatever you are, convincing you of a false narrative. It is the opposite of strategic empathy. So what we have now is an empire that goes with a person like Joe Biden. The only reason Joe Biden's there is because they saw something they didn't like. It could have been Bernie, Smyrney, Fernie, whoever the hell it was. They don't like this person. Biden's going to be the guy. That's why he's there. After they got Biden in, they're like, oh God, what do we have? Who gives a shit? Because we're going to do what we want. And we got Joe Biden there, whatever, right? Okay, so we move forward. Then they're like, what are we going to back Joe Biden up with? At that point, understanding how they think, because they don't care about competency, right? Because it's all about narrative. At this point, you're going to choose your vice president based on what? Narrative, right? So the narrative is a human rights narrative. We are concerned about the poor. We're concerned about minorities. We're concerned about women and the downtrodden and all of that, right? So because you don't care about competency, because you only want compliance, you go with a narrative. Well, we can pick this woman. Why? Well, first and foremost, she's compliant. Forget whether she's a woman of color, not of color. What the hell is a woman of color anyway? Of color. What does that even mean? But first and foremost, Kamala Harris is compliant. Let's continue. Secondly, she ain't very bright. I mean, if you listen to her, she talks to everybody like they're in elementary school. Well, boys and girls, the big country attack the little country. And then she does, and she's not too bright, but they don't care. They didn't pick her for her intellects. They picked her first and foremost for her compliance. First of all, you must be compliant. You must go along with what the oligarchs tell you. Now that you recognize she's compliant, then you say, if somebody says she wasn't born in the USA, they don't give a shit if she was born on the moon, as long as she's compliant. Now that they determined that she's compliant, they've talked to her, they took her up to the Hamptons and they interviewed her and all that. Oh, great. You're going to do what you're told. Yes, great. You can be president. So boom, right? I argue she is the Democrats' version of Sarah Palin. I remember Sarah Palin, and I looked at Sarah Palin and I said, that's the problem. Sarah Palin is intellectually limited, shall we say. Kamala Harris is intellectually limited. We will get to Liz Truss, right? But these people are clearly intellectually limited. That's not to say that they're not smart or bright, intellectually limited in some other ways. Spend all day into that, but there's a lot of ways to be intellectually limited. Look at Kamala Harris. Trust me, it won't be long before you figure it out, right? So Kamala Harris is a very pretty woman. She really is. She's if you look at Kamala Harris, very beautiful woman, right? So she fits like Obama. Good-looking guy, tall, look great in a suit. You got to give him that, right? That's a reality. Kamala Harris, you look at her, she's a pretty lady, right? So that she's pretty. She is a woman of color, but she still maintains enough European features that she's not, black. She's not like a representative of what in America would be considered the peasant class, a descendant of the slave class, the wider nose, the big lip kind of black person, the person who has the more Africanish traditional features, right? She's not that. Couldn't be president if she was that, if you understand America. So she represents everything they want as far as the narrative. It's only the narrative with her. Boom, there you go. We've got a compliant guy who's sadly been, past his sell-by date. And we've got a compliant person who is let's just say Stephen Hawking, she ain't, but she's pretty. She's got some color in her. I don't know how much. And boom, we can make the narrative that we're about human rights and women and minorities and all this horse shit that this is untrue, and people won't even think about what she's doing or the positions that she's taking. Boom, you got your paired right there. They're leading the empire, but they're not leading the empire. When you look at them and you realize that Joe Biden isn't too sharp, that he's kind of wandering around aimlessly for no apparent reason half the time with his hands out like this, trying to shake hands with the ghost of Corn Pop, you start to realize, well, they sure didn't pick this guy because he's friggin' JFK or Abe Lincoln or something, right? Both who were, I might add, killed in office. As if that's an accident. And you look at Harris and you're like, well, God knows they didn't pick her because she's Eleanor whatchamacallit, Roosevelt, for God's sake. Because she ain't, Eleanor Rigby. But at any rate, so that's it. So what you have to glean from those two people being chosen by the powers that be is that they're puppets, that they are chosen there to execute the plans of one of two things, of the oligarchs that fund them and the machine, one, and number two, the long-running ideology of the national security state, of the blob, of the neocons that have ascended to power in so many places, right? Of the corporate rulers of this country, right? You got to realize that's what they're there for, which now means democracy's over. No hope of democracy. Keep in mind something that I said about these two people, and that is they were chosen by the elite ruling class, not by the people. The elite ruling class, what they do, people look at the outcome of the election, the two people in a general election. Here's what I say: watch the primaries, because here's what I want you to do. If I'm the elite ruling class, when you go to the general election, I want you to have two options that I put forward for you. Heads, I win; tails, you lose. If I have someone there who's possibly could do your bidding, then I got a problem, because they may win and probably will. And I don't want that to happen. So after they played the game and put a couple of puppets up there, then you can choose, you want puppet A or puppet B, and you choose puppet B and you think you won. And next time you go to puppet A and you still think you won, you never win, because they're puppets. Okay. So there we understand that the U.S. empire now is the puppet masters behind the curtains controlling very incompetent people, which means you're going to get the opposite of stability. Someone in the ruling class has to be seeking stability and has to have a plan to achieve stability in order for you to get stability. But if you understand the neocons, they want the opposite of stability. They want chaos. They want to overthrow a country. They want chaos. Then they can go in and steal their whatever and maintain chaos, and they can operate in it. They believe in an environment of chaos. So you have the U.S. empire ruling with a ghost leadership in the background who you don't get to see or know who they are. And then Joe Biden can come out and say what he's told and wander around aimlessly. Kamala Harris can confuse North Korea and South Korea. God only knows, every time she goes on a trip, she humiliates herself and embarrasses her country. But that's who they chose. That's what they want. They'd rather have that than somebody who would be an independent thinker. In the same way that no nation is allowed to be independent and sovereign, no politician in this machine is allowed to be independent and sovereign either. They got to be part of the machine. They got to be part of the blob, part of the Borg, right? So what happens now? You've got that. And might I add, let me add one other thing. Let's go back to something real quick. One of the things they did was ensure that you don't get a choice, that by the time it gets time to vote, they got both people wrapped up and you get a choice between frick and frack, between puppet A and puppet B, right? And one of the ways they do that is melding these two parties by creating a power base in each party that's identical. And now you can argue that Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer are at odds, and you're supposed to believe that. And you're, oh man, they're really fighting it out. But for all of the things that matter to the oligarchs, they'll never be at odds. They're always going to pass things for the banks, things for the weapon industry, things for neocon foreign policy. So you get to believe that there are two parties. You get to believe, but in the end, you always get to choose between puppet A and puppet B. And in the end, the things that the ruling class, the ruling oligarchs, and the neocon foreign policy ideology want is always gets priority. So now that you have that, let's move to the colonies of the puppets, right? That would be, let's go to Europe. Look at the UK. You have Jeremy Corbyn, who is effectively some iteration of Bernie Sanders, and he's in England. And at one point, he definitely had a chance to win. And now we find out from a couple of different articles, Mint Press News has a great article about it, that the party, his own party, the Labour Party, conspired against Jeremy Corbyn to stop him. Well, Jeremy Corbyn has always, first and foremost, he stood up for the Palestinians. That's problematic for the U.S. empire, because the Israelis are settler colonialists, and so is Canada, and so is the US, and so is Australia. And for someone to come out against settler colonialism in a settler colonial empire is unacceptable, right? So there was a time when even Mike Pompeo said, if it looks like Corbyn's going to win, we're not going to sit around and wait. In other words, the empire made it clear there's no democracy there. That ain't happening. So they conspired with the Israelis. They conspired with the Labour Party to take their own people. So here's what we got. The Labour Party and the Tories worked together to get Bojo in office. Think about that. Think about that. That is the illusion of democracy, the illusion of conflict between the two parties. So that in the end, they presented the guy that the ruling elite wanted, and they utilized both parties to do it, which means what? You don't have democracy in the UK. Bojo comes in. Let's not forget a lot of the things that happened. One of the things that happened was the 5G. The Chinese are putting in these masts all over the place. They're putting in these towers, 5G. The UK was going to be set up for a great 5G system, best in the world. The U.S. calls them and says, we don't want you to do it. And the UK argued, no, we got to do it, blah, blah, blah. And the word is, it has been widely reported that the U.S. State Department people yelled at Bojo and just basically, in other words, said, screw you. Don't you know who you are? Don't you know we fund everything? Don't you know what jeopardy you're putting yourselves in? So you'll do what we tell you to do. And Bojo said, okay. A perfect example. It was in the best interest of the people of the UK to have a better technological infrastructure. But because the empire told Bojo, and Bojo's nothing but a puppet, again, a guy who's not bright. What was he, a writer or something? What was he, worked at one of the tabloids or something like that? This guy's not bright, but he wasn't put in there because he was bright. He was put in there because he's compliant. Because when it came down to it, when Bojo had to make a decision between what his people want, stability, economic stability, and acting on behalf of the U.S. empire, he's always going to choose acting on behalf of the U.S. empire. He's compliant. Enter Liz Truss. Liz Truss comes in. I've read that after meeting her, the first thing that Biden said was, she's not too smart. She can't be trusted. It doesn't take you don't have to go to a John Hopkins brain center for them to do IQ tests and evaluate your brain to figure out that Liz Truss is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So she gets in power and just stumbles out of the gate and steps on a rake, wham, right in the middle of the forehead. Hey, she starts off. She's not even smart enough to recognize the current circumstances of desperation. If you come to power, somebody says, okay, here's what we've done. We've slammed this ship into an iceberg and it's going down. And the captain says, what are you going to do? We're going to fire the captain. Okay, well, I can understand that. The ship's going down. You're going to fire the captain in the icy waters of the Atlantic. And you say, somebody says, we need a new captain. They look at me. Hey, Garland, how would you like to be the captain of a gigantic luxury liner, the biggest one in the world? And Garland's like, it's got a big gash in the side and it's going down. Perhaps you can choose somebody else. I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm jumping in a lifeboat. That tells you she's an idiot. If she had any wisdom whatsoever, when they said, do you want to be prime minister? She'd take a look at the situation and say, you got to be friggin' kidding me. No, thank you. Somebody else hit this iceberg. They can go down with the ship. I'm getting in a lifeboat. But no, in her quest for power, she's like, I'll take it. Thanks. And then she comes out with what any neoliberal would do, complete disregard for the plight of her people. And she starts off saying, how can I move forward with neoliberal policies? And so her people are like, my God, we're drowning. She says, okay, that's fair enough. I got a plan. What is it? It's the neoliberal plan. For starters, we're going to do gigantic tax cuts for the wealthy. And people are like, and how's that going to help us? Keep listening. You're not going to get a good answer, but just keep listening anyway. Secondly, gigantic tax cuts for the wealthy. And we're going to borrow a fortune, and we're going to use that money to give it directly to the fossil fuel companies that are making a fortune right now. They're going to make even a better fortune. Oh, by the way, we're going to use tax money. You got to pay it. Oh, by the way, we borrowed a fortune for the lockdowns and all that kind of stuff. So now, we're basically going to be in debt up to our asses. And here's what's even worse. We're being deindustrialized, so we'll never be able to pay it back. And people are like, yeah, that don't sound like a good plan, Liz. So again, the crisis of leadership. You get a person who's a compliant ideologue, who as soon as they get to power, the first thing they think is, I've been dying to institute neoliberal policies. They don't think, right? What would you think? What would Garland say? Garland, you're in charge of the Titanic. Okay, get me my engineers. Yeah, I want you to look at the ship, see, is there any possibility the ship can be saved? If no, then we go to a plan. What are we going to do? How are we going to get these people? I want to know the number of lifeboats and the number of people. I want info. Bring me info and bring it to me fast, right? So we can make some decisions in the best interest to save as many people as possible. That's what you're going to do if you're captain. You just took over as captain of Titanic. That ain't what she did. Why? Because she don't give a crap about these people. Let them all drown. That ain't what she's here to do. She's not here to save the lives of the passengers. She's here on behalf of the people that own the luxury liner. Right? And they're like, go around. There's a lot of gold in the safe. Go to the safe, get the gold, take your own lifeboat and save yourself in that lifeboat, just as long as you save all the gold. What about the passengers? Let them drown. Just get the gold. That's what she's doing. Let them drown, get the gold. What are you going to do? We're going to hand it out. Well, who's going to pay for all this? The passengers. Well, who the hell cares about it? First of all, the British people are going to pay for all of this. What does she care? But a lot of them are going to be dead, frozen, hungry, starved, miserable. What are they going to do? They're weak and they're going to get weaker. So what does she care? We're going to take some loans. We're going to do stupid things. Why? Because I'm a neoliberal and that's all I know how to do. She doesn't know how to do anything. So she comes in and the people of Britain are like, you got to be shitting me. So everybody's looking like they said, she's got 6 months. And now they're like 6 minutes. 6 hours, 6 days, and she's friggin' out of here. So her time is certainly, going to be short. But again, let's do the same thing that we did in the US. Additionally, you got to look at Liz Truss and say, what's the options? Sir Keir Starmer? See, they already have the setup. Liz Truss loses, Keir Starmer's waiting. Do you think he's a compliant puppet? He's one of the people who work for the machine to take out Corbyn so that Labor could be in the hands of the, super rich ruling elite class. So again, what happens? Okay, so they get rid of Liz Truss. You just get another iteration of Liz Truss. Now, he's not quite as stupid as she is, but he's every bit as compliant, which makes it even worse. I mean, if I'm going to have a leader, give me a stupid leader. If I'm going to have a corrupt puppet, give me a stupid corrupt puppet because they can't hide it as well. So Cameron's going to come in. And what the British people are going to do is like this, because I read now that the Tories are like 30% underwater when it comes to the elections. They'll be far worse than that. And at some point, she's out the door. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, Keir Starmer comes back. They might as well bring Bojo back. What the hell? You know, what the hell if that's the game you're playing? But let's say Keir Starmer comes in, and then what happens is this: the British people are going to go, "Oh my God, we got a new leader," but nobody's going to expect anything different, and they get anything different because he's going to be chosen for compliance. And at some point, here's the question about that, and we're still moving forward. Here's the question I think that you have to think: what happens when in a country, when the people choose a leader and that leader betrays them, and they say, okay, we're going in another direction, and they go to the other party and they choose a leader, and that leader betrays them in the exact same way that the other leader betrayed them? When the people now say, holy crap, there is no hope, that's a bad situation, and there's no telling what's going to happen then. I think when that happens, that's when people lose hope in the system. They lose faith in the system, and you got real problems when people lose faith in the system. That's when they start burning things down. That's when they start tearing things up. That's when a country falls into chaos and pandemonium and becomes ungovernable. Now let's move over to Germany. You got Olaf Scholz, Ollie. Olaf Scholz right now, I mean, this guy was, basically, let's face it, he was raped on international TV by Joe Biden. I mean, literally, I mean, not literally, but figuratively, he was raped. He's on international TV, and he's standing there, and they're saying, hey, are you going to, what's happening with Nord Stream 2? He's like, hey, we got that covered. They go to Joe Biden standing right next to him. He's like, Joe Biden's sitting there like, oh, don't listen to this idiot. He has no power. He's nobody. Let me explain something to you. Nord Stream 2 is dead. It's done. It's going to go. And they look, what about you? Ollie Schultz. He's like, well, puts his head down. I'm just a puppet. I don't know. Ask him. He might as well said that. Well, I have no power or authority. My country is just a colony of the United States. I don't know what the hell. Ask Joe Biden. And then ultimately, Biden and Dark Brandon and crew go in and they blow the hell out of German infrastructure. And what are the Germans doing? What's all Olaf Scholz doing? Is he standing up, shaking his fist? This must not stand. That's terrorism. Is he on the back channels with the Biden team? Hey, you sons of bitches. Screw you. I'm not going along with you. No, he's not. He is down on his knees begging for mercy and forgiveness. He is thanking them and asking them to forgive him for having the effrontery to exist. He is the weakest human being, a spineless freaking jellyfish. That's what he's doing. That's what the people of Germany have as a leader. I don't think Olaf Scholz is stupid. He's something much worse than that. But first of all, what is he? He's compliant to a point where he has no concern for either stability or for the needs of his people. He's just trying to save his own hide, and he ain't doing much of a job at that. So he's just a sacrificial lamb. He's a person that, you know what he reminds me of? An alien movie. Watching the Aliens versus Predators, right? And what happens? The queen alien has all these little aliens running around her, and she is locked up in chains, right? Well, the aliens have acid for blood, which can burn through metal, right? So she nods to a couple of her little aliens, and they kill a couple of the smaller aliens over the metal chains. Their blood leaks onto the chains, burns the chains through. She's free. Off she runs to continue with her miscreant activity and her reign of death. All right. That's what Olaf Scholz is. He's the alien that volunteers to die for the queen. When the queen nods her head and she says, you and you go stand over those chains. You and you go kill those guys and tear their bodies to shreds so that the acid can be on the chains. You're the alien. Olaf Scholz is the alien that goes stands on the chain and waits to be torn to shreds so that his blood can free the queen. That's all it is. So he's like, he knows he's going to get thrown out of office. He knows he's going to go down in humiliation as the worst leader in the history of Germany, maybe one of the worst leaders in the history of the world. But when the queen shakes her head to him and says, stand there so that your blood can free me, he says, yes, I will. And he stands there and he sacrifices himself. But he sacrifices all the people of Germany with him. So he's a puppet. That's why I say an evil puppet and a clown. Scholz isn't as much a clown because he's not as stupid as the rest of these, but he's just as much of a puppet. He's just as compliant, and he's evil. I would argue that Bojo and Truss are clowns. I mean, let me tell you something. I like British comedy. It's awesome. Mr. Bean. My daughter was little. Oh, we watched Mr. Bean. We loved it and we laughed, right? She giggled and sniggled, and I did with her, right? My favorite, the Blackadder, right? Sir Roland Blackadder. They're great. And in the Blackadder, remember who they had? They had this guy named Baldrick, and it was like the stupidest guy in the world. You ever notice British comedies always have like some idiot, and they have the best idiots in the world. Baldrick was one of the best idiots in the world, right? They're like straight men beside the lead, and the Brits are so good at comedy, and they're so good at having an idiot, right? That's what they got in Bojo and Liz Truss. Baldrick. Well, if you don't know who that is, watch the Blackadder and look at Baldrick. There you go. That's Liz Truss. That's Bojo. Keir Steimer is a little bit different. He's an evil. I don't think he's stupid, but he's a compliant puppet. So that when he comes in, they get more of the same. And I think that's when the British people really get pissed off. We go to good old Ollie. Ollie's not stupid, but he's a puppet, and he's the alien that uses his own blood to burn up the change and free the queen. So he's just a sacrificial puppet, a self-sacrificial puppet, a person that's willing to say, I'm willing to give up everything for me and my country when I'm told to do it. Now, but let's go somewhere else. Let's go to Hungary. Viktor Orban. Here I am, a lefty. I'm no fan of Viktor Orban. I'm a lefty. I'm a far lefty. But ask me where I'd rather live right now, Hungary or Germany, and why? Why? Ideologically, I'm not aligned with Viktor Orban. However, he's not compliant. He's not stupid. He doesn't say, listen to this. Listen to this. Viktor Orban practices strategic empathy. When they say the Russians are evil and terrible and blah, 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 Orban's like, look, they're trying to eat too. We're trying to eat. The Russians are trying to eat. Everybody's trying to eat here. Why don't we just chill out so we can all eat? That's just practicality. That's strategic empathy. Hey, the Russians are evil. Man, they're just trying to eat, just like us. Let's do what we got to do so that everybody eats. As opposed to you idiots, nobody's going to eat but the Russians. Right. So if you look at Orban, we can talk about ideology, we can talk about right and left wing, but in the end, regardless of whether Orban's right wing or left wing, in the end, doesn't it come down to the basics of leadership, right? Does he practice strategic empathy? Yes, with the Russians. Yes, he doesn't say they're wonderful, great people, but he just says, look, basically in a nutshell, they're trying to eat. We're trying to eat. Let's work this thing out so everybody eats. That's strategic empathy. Now, is he accountable to his people? Recently, Viktor Orban said, well, you know what we're going to do regarding these sanctions? Yeah. We're going to have a vote, a referendum, and let everybody choose. Remember what I talked about earlier? There's a couple of ways that a leader can practice democracy, and one of them is direct practice of democracy, where he says, we have a choice to make. Okay, leader, what do you have to say? I'll get back to you in a little bit. He goes back to his people and says, I'm going to take a vote. You guys decide. We're going to have a vote. You guys decide. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Do you want to do this thing? That again, he's accountable to his people. I don't have to agree with him ideologically as to what he wants, but I can look at it and say, as a leader, does he practice strategic empathy? As a leader, is he accountable to his people? Right? I will take that over a compliant puppet all day, because you know what you get out of that? Let's go back to what I started. What do you get out of that? You get stability. This winter, things aren't going to be so great in England. Germany, oh, they're fucked. It's just God knows I wouldn't want to be in Germany. You don't want to be there. Don't travel to Germany. Don't go there. That ain't going to be no place to be this winter, right? Hungary, yes, they're going to have issues. Everybody's going to have issues. But one of them ain't going to be freezing to death, because they've set up a plan where they're getting their stuff from Russia. And unless one of the kooks that controls the pipelines that gets to them is able to cut those, the U.S. will blow your pipelines in a minute. So it wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden the Russians decide to blow up Hungary's pipelines, right? But unless the Russians blow up Hungary's pipelines, then Hungary's going to be fine. And again, leadership, not ideology. We look at ideology. Who would I want for a leader? I'd rather have a Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn or somebody to the different left of them, right? Because that's where my ideology is. But living in a day-to-day country, stability trumps ideology. Which would you rather have? A person who is ideologically aligned with you that creates an unstable environment, an unstable political and economic environment, or a person who is not ideologically aligned with you, but you get a stable society, right? There are a few people that wouldn't choose the stable society. If you wouldn't choose a stable society, you know nothing about politics. And let me tell you something. After you live in an unstable, I'll put it like this. If you wouldn't choose a stable society, you've never lived in or visited an unstable society. I have visited nations that are victims of the U.S. empire's drastic sanctions regimes and seen the pain that we cause. And I know what's coming because I've seen countries where and been to countries where our sanctions have created the very environment that our politics are now creating in the likes of a Germany, in the likes of a UK. If you've ever seen that, you know what it's like. I was a man. I mean, I'm in a country. I'm not gonna name all the country. I'm in a country, and I'm a pescatarian, which means I eat seafood, no meat. But the country, because of sanctions, was very, very poor. And I lived for 8 days. Now, I don't even eat sweets, to speak of. Very rarely. Stay away from them. Sometimes, but it's rare. Man, I went 8 days. And you know what I was getting there? Rice. But I'll put it like this. There was so little vegetables in the rice that it was just like colored dots. Like, hey, there's a little bit of an orangish yellow colored dot in my rice. I'm suspecting that is carrots. Ooh, look at this, a greenish colored dot in my rice. I wonder if it's broccoli. That's what I lived off for 8 days. And I was in the best hotel in the country I stayed in. And Coca-Cola. You know why I drank Coca-Cola? I stay away from sweets, but I had to have something that had some taste. I had one morning, I had eggs for breakfast. And I'm like, oh God, this is so good. Let me put some pepper on it and, a little bit of potatoes. Oh my God, real food. I thought I was in heaven because I'm in a country that's being wiped out by the sanctions from the US. And I'm staying in the lap of luxury and I'm still suffering. And I'm like, man, the people out here are struggling. I feel sorry for their asses. They are screwed all because of the US, right? I've seen that. And I understand that if I've got to live in a country with someone who runs the country who is ideologically not aligned with me, but they want some level of stability. So I'm not going to have war and I'm not going to be starving and I'm not going to be out of fuel and things like that. I got to practically take the one who's not ideologically aligned with me, but the more stable leader. If you don't take the more stable leader, you don't know what's coming. You have not been to a country and seen that kind of crap. As soon as you're there, you're like, let's see. Schultz, Truss, Orban. I'm moving to Hungary. I'm out. I'm going to Hungary. Right? It's looking out for your own interest again, which is what the leader's going to do. Then we go to Italy. So Italy's finding out the hard way. They get this Maloney, whatever the hell her name is. And in she comes, Aspen Institute, another puppet. And again, it's like going from Bojo to Liz Truss to Keir Starmer. They're like, yay, we're saved. Oh God, we finally got a far right-wing leader. And she comes in. What's the first thing she does? Cuts. There's a small amount of money that goes to the super poor in Italy, right? The super poor get it. What is a neoliberal going to do first? Hey, we're giving money to old people and the poor. Oh my God, no. Stop that. The first thing she does is at a time of economic pain, the little teeny scraps that are going to the poor, she starts by cutting that. Then she does a tongue bath for Zelensky. She sends him some letter. She goes, oh, I got you covered, bro. They're high-fiving, they're chest bumping like somebody just slam dunk, like you're watching an NBA game. You ever seen it? Some guy slam dunks and they're chest bumping, they're high-fiving, they're dancing, they're doing the shake as they run down the court. That's what she's doing with Zelensky. Right? They're doing that because it's a joke to them. These stupid sons of bitches. They think they got a far right person. They think they won something. Apparently, they didn't read my resume. And that's where Italy is. You didn't read her resume, Italy. You did not read her resume. And all you got is another version of what you already had. Now, what's interesting is there, at least Berlusconi's in there. And Berlusconi is interesting because he has a history of friendship. One might say he has a relationship with Putin. I don't think there's a lot of things Berlusconi that you could, look at him and say that ain't great. But when you're comparing him to the crop of leaders they got now, I think he's 85. That's an issue because it makes it easier for them to kill him and just say, hey, obviously he slipped and bumped his head. You know how these old guys are. Wow, he slipped and bumped his head about 50 times. And he seems to have shot himself and then threw gasoline on himself and hung himself and then set himself on fire. What a odd way to die. Obviously, natural causes, right? But this guy will be in there. They're going to need Berlusconi, I think. And we'll see what happens with him. I think that a lot of the Italians may feel that they can, through Berlusconi, get some level of practical government, because that's what they need, is practical government and stability. With a neoliberal puppet like Maloney, they got the same damn thing. They think it's the right. They think they got something different in Italy. Good luck. You'll find out. So that's what we got. And I could go from country to country, but it's the same thing. It is a matter of the U.S. empire having the parties below them, the colonies below them, reflecting the ideology of neoliberalism and neoconservatism. Say basically, and first and foremost, whether it's Biden, whether it's Harris, Truss, Oli, the goalie. There's a guy. That's the Capitals. Oli. We used to have a guy named Olaf something or other who was the goalie, and they called him Oli the goalie. But whatever the case, the bottom line is this: first and foremost, always have compliance. And now the people of Europe and the US are going to find out what compliance brings them as opposed to stability. They ain't getting stability. It's going to be nasty. And so we're looking at an interesting time where the discussion of leadership and is critical. And let me add this as we wind down. The real crisis is this. There's one thing if you're in a ship and you're steaming towards an iceberg and somebody on the crow's nest, that's the person up top, the little thing way up high who's looking at, the guys from the crow's nest call down and say, I see an iceberg ahead, off the starboard bow or dead ahead, whatever, right? And the captain is competent and says, bring it to 10 degrees to right, full, full whatever, right? Full ahead, bring the rudder 10 degrees to the, to starboard, whatever, right? That's one thing. You got a person who knows what they're doing. But what happens when you have an incompetent captain and your backup to the captain is incompetent? And the reason they're incompetent is because the people that own the shipping lines only want an incompetent captain. They don't want somebody who's going to look out for the people on the ship, because they got a bunch of gold and diamonds in the safe. And the only thing they care about is if that ship goes down, that they've got a compliant captain that will go to the safe, get the diamonds and gold, jump in a lifeboat and leave. Everybody else can die as far as they're concerned. Just get back with my gold. You get back to shore with my gold and diamonds. I don't give a shit if you got the ship or not. I don't care if it's on the bottom of the Atlantic. And what happens to the people in the ship when they look up and there's a new captain, and the captain don't know how to steer them away from the iceberg? Captain, should we go to port or starboard? Port, is that left or right? Can you refresh my memory? Yeah. Even the way you even remember it, how you remember port? This is the old saying on what you drink port, you drink port wine with your left hand. That's how you remember port from starboard, right? So you got a guy who doesn't know port from starboard, and now he's in charge of the ship. At that point, the people on the ship are going to look at each other and say, we got to handle the ship ourselves. If we have a chance, we got to manage this issue, because we got a person who has no clue in how to run the ship, and B, who has no care about us anyway. And we've replaced the person with somebody else, and we got the same thing. So it's obvious that amongst our candidates for leadership, we do not have a candidate who is capable and willing to look out for our behalf. That's the problem. The true crisis is a crisis of leadership. You got three things. The crisis was caused by leadership. The crisis is being the leaderships are in charge during the crisis, and the only people that you can replace them with are just as incompetent. So you have crisis caused by your leaders that are unable to address the crisis, people who are behind them that you replace them with that are just as bad as them. So you've got a crisis and no ruling elite. See, the legitimacy of the ruling elite is out the window. You got a crisis and the ruling elite is not able to deal with the crisis. They're not even really concerned about dealing with the crisis. In fact, what they do are things to make the crisis deepen. That's what we're looking at here. That is the crisis, the evil puppets and clowns, the U.S. empire's leadership crisis. Thanks a lot, everybody. Let me go and look through, because we have some super chats, and I always got to say something. Emery Chan says, love your shows. US pronounced she, not Z. Oh, thank you very much. And have you seen this? Apparently, let me add, I'm glad you brought up China. Let me add something real quick. Did you know that it's being widely reported that the Chinese president is saying to Chinese banks, prepare to dump the US dollars, prepare to dump them, right? I think what they're doing is this. They're looking at, remember, the Chinese have the Russians back. They got their back, right? I think what they're saying is this. That's a tool. That's a weapon. That's one of the weapons I can use. That's a tool I have, right? I think what they're saying is this. The US, they're looking at what Russia's going to do, and Russia's getting ready to make a move. Russia's getting ready to up the ante. They're getting ready to blow the living frog shit out of Ukraine. I truly believe that. You're going to see a very, very significant uptick in activities by the Russians here in the next month or two, maybe even in the next week or two. And I think what the Chinese are prepping to do is this. The Russians are going to start blasting Ukrainians. Now, at that point, they're like, well, what is the US empire going to do? They'll do something. Hey, we're going to do this. What the Chinese could then do is this, right? It's like this. I remember when I was a kid, I love stories like this. I was a kid, and it was me and like my best friend, and we used to run over at the time. We were like 12, 13. And we used to go to this other little area, and there was a little school, and the kids in the community would go out. There was a little basketball court, right? Kids would roller skate and ride their bicycles, and some would throw a basketball at the rim. And we were kids, whatever, right? We're laughing and sniggling, right? And my friend, there was a kid that was bigger than me. And he's like picking on my best friend, and he's like pushed him around, and he's going to fight him, right? And I got behind him and pushed him. Now, we were both smaller, and he's looking over his back, and he realized something. This kid's bigger than me, and I can beat him up. But behind me is his friend. And if I go after him, I'm going to take some hits from behind, and I'm going to have to look behind, and then he can hit me, and I look here and he can hit me, right? So the issue was I stayed out of his reach from behind, and I came up and I kind of pushed him in the back. I was 12 or 13, but here's what I knew. I'm sending you a signal. If you attack my friend, A, you got to fight both of us. But B, I'm going to distract you. I'm going to, do all kinds of things behind you that I can do because you can't focus on me. Do you really want to? I might bite you. I might pull on your clothes. I might do anything. But you're going to have a problem. Do you want that? You got a distraction. Here's my point. Russia makes a move on Ukraine. At that point, the U.S. is like, we're going to up the ante. And China says, all right, dump the U.S. dollars. Now, right now, dump them. Boom, they dump the US dollars, and then it goes across. Holy shit, the stock market's crashing. The US has problems. The dollar's falling. These things are happening. Oh, well, how bad will it get? Blah, 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 blah. Now, what has happened? As the US is looking at Russia, they got smacked in the back of the head by China with the dollar dump, right? I think China is setting up a move. And remember what I said? Russia and China, I believe in my last video, I said, I believe that Russia and China really intends to get through this particular issue without getting Biden and his group of mad dogs to push the button and kill us all. So instead of China saying, okay, if you do that, I'll take Taiwan, which they could do. They could say, all right, US, if you get tangled up over here with Russia, we're going to take Taiwan, and let's see if you can go at both of us at the same time. Let's see what you do there. Do you want war with Russia and China at the same time? Right? Instead, when China or they can just do it. When Russia makes their move, right? Russia makes their move. They're bringing their aircraft. They start bombing the frog shit out of Ukraine. Before the U.S. can do anything, China dumps. See that again? Would be my strategy. Before the U.S. can do anything, I dump the dollars. So you're like, oh, look at Russia. They're over there going after Ukraine. Wham, right in the back of the head. Holy shit, they dropped dollars. So now I'm distracted. I can't focus on that. Now the people in the US are saying, what's happening to the dollar? How come the dollar's fall? Oh my God, what's happened to the stock market? And they may do something else. They may say, we're doing that and we're kicking Apple the hell out of our country. I don't know what else. I'm just throwing things out there. Right. But I think it's like, again, like what was I looking at? A distraction move. You attack my buddy. He's smaller than you. I'm smaller than you, but I'm going to distract you from behind. I may pick something up and hit you in the head with it. I don't have to beat you up, but I can distract you. He can get a punch. You look this way, boom, he punches you. You look at him, boom, I punch you from behind. You want to fight two people? It's going to be a problem. It ain't going to be easy. You might not win that one. Right? And I think that's what we're looking at. China is looking. Let me look at this. Let me before I leave, before I go, I got a couple minutes anyway. Let me do this. China dump US. And let me share this with you, just so you know I'm not talking crap. Check this out. China may dump US treasuries as sign of US tensions flare. Global Times. Right there it is. Right there it is. Now, here's what I have to say. What you have now is you have some level of leadership, agree with them or not. They're being practical. They're working together. They're deciding how they're going to stabilize the situation. If Russia ups the ante so they can try to end this war, which I think they're going to try to end it in a few months with overwhelming firepower. But if they do that, you've got an unstable actor in the neocons that may act in an unstable manner. How are you going to stabilize that? I'm going to drop their damn I'm going to dump the hell out of $1 trillion worth of treasury bonds, and we'll see how them sons of bitches react to that. We're going to punch them from a different direction. I think that's what you're kind of looking at. And it's you're punch drunk. I hit you over here. You look that way. I hit you over there because there's two people and you're only one. And that's what I think. That's kind of what I think the future holds for the U.S. For the U.S. empire. Those people are practical leaders. They're plotting and planning on how they can deal with this. The U.S. empire doesn't have practical leaders. They have compliant puppets, and they're just swimming, trying to figure out what to do, how to live within the narrative that they've been given. The U.S. empire gives them a narrative. Olaf Scholz. They can say to Schultz, let's face it, how preposterous is this? They can literally say to Schultz, Olaf, here's what the plan. We're going to, you look, dumbass, you know we blew the shit out of your pipeline. I know it, you know it. So here's your plan. Shut the hell up. We're going to blame it on the Russians. Now, Schultz can say, well, nobody's going to believe that. Did I ask you who's going to believe that? That's what they'll look at him. Excuse me. Looking at you, Olaf. Did I ask you who's going to believe that? I said, you're going to say it. Do you understand me, mister? And Olaf Scholz will just put his head down and squeal like the proverbial pig. Whee! That's all he'll do. He'll squeal like a pig. When he's told to squeal like a pig, he will grab his ankles. That's like the movie Deliverance, and he will squeal like a pig, a boar hog, as the guy said in as the old mountain man said in Deliverance. Boy, I think we got us a boar hog here instead of no. He said, I think we got us a sow here instead of a boar hog. That's what Olaf Scholz has been treated like all along. They've treated him like a boar hog. They're going to continue to make him squeal because they know he'll squeal. So that's what's coming for them. I think there will be a crisis over the winter based on the fact that the leaders of these countries have not sought stability, and it looks to me like the crisis will be really existential for Europe, and we will see how that turns out. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the crisis of leadership. So let me make sure before I get ready to go. Get ready to watch me some football today. We did, Emery. Your metaphors make a serious topic and entertain. Thank you, Emery Chan. Did we see Emery Chan here? Love your show. G is pronounced she, not Z. Thanks a lot, Emery. I really appreciate that help. Oh, we're not a lot of super chats, but that's okay. I appreciate everybody being on, but I do want to make sure if there are any super chats that I don't miss them. And I don't see any more. So thank everyone who did a super chat on YouTube. We're now going to Rockfin, and oh boy, we've got some people on Rockfin. Let's look. Laurie Lamb says, what never seems to get mentioned is that China needs the U.S. just as much as we need them. No other country is going to consume the amount of crap that ours done, nowhere near it. And here's the thing about that. Let me add something that outstanding comment from the lovely Laurie Lamb up in beautiful Colorado. Here's the thing about it, Laurie, and this is important. I think also think about the EU, the United States. It is the parasite killing the host. Man, the people of the EU buy. I think they're like the number one consumer of U.S. products, right? So all of these products that we're making, and Europe's buying all of them, and we're wiping out Europe's economy. The parasite's killing the host. Who are we going to sell all that old shit to? Who's going to have it? Number one. Number two, what else is going to happen? Let me add this. And that is, The powers that be expected the crash that's starting already in the EU and the crash of the pound and the crash of the euro. They expected that to happen probably in the spring, in my opinion. But it's happening now. It's already started. Why? Why is it happening now? Here's what I believe. Because the Western economy is built purely on speculation. It's built on speculation. It's built on bullshit. It's built on magic and derivatives and asset-backed securities. And God knows we'd be here for an hour if I was trying to explain what asset-backed securities and derivatives are. And by the time I got finished, you wouldn't understand what the hell I was talking about, and neither would I. But I'd just be talking for an hour. And at the end, you'd say, what the hell is this guy talking about? And I'd say the same thing. It's magic, right? So basically, as the European economy dies, the U.S. sales to that and the services that we provide to them, et cetera, is going to die too. So it's going to catch us. We're going to kill the European economy with no regard for the people there, but it's going to come home and catch us. So yes, that's a tremendous tremendous comment from Lori. I want to thank her in 87 who also tipped. I want to thank Minax Cogitum, who says, good morning, Garland. Happy to see you today. I want to thank, let me see, anyone else? Yeah, I want to thank Lori Lamb. But see, here's the thing. We need China just as much as they need us. And one of the things that you see happening with China and Russia is they're building, one of the first things Russia did? They started finding places to sell their material outside of the West. Everybody wants energy. They ain't having no problem as long as they got energy, customers they can eat. And as long as they got energy, they're going to have customers. I always say it's like weed. You got weed, you ain't got to search for customers. All you got to do is put it out. If you're a weed salesman, let people know you got weed. You'll never have to look for customers. You offer weed. You don't sell it. People come to you. It's called, in business, it's called market insistence. That's where Russia is. If you got gold and titanium and nickel and you name it, and you got all different manners of energy, you ain't got to search for customers. All people will find out that you have customers and they'll come to you. You know what? I love these kinds of, somebody said metaphors. I'll use another one. I guess I was 23 and I had a girlfriend that I thought the world of at that time. She was a very nice person. In fact, a quick story. Years and years later, my mother said, and I'll just use a name. We'll make up a name, Robin. Good enough. And years later, my sister said to me, yes, mom never liked Robin. And I was like, why is it that mom never liked Robin? She says, well, mom thought Robin was no good. I said, well, she had it backwards. And I said, what? I said, Robin was great. I was the one that was no good. So that's the bottom line. Well, ultimately, where we're getting to is here, because I just looked at, my God, I've been on for an hour and 12. I'm going to stop with the old stories and stop with the metaphors. I was going somewhere, but it's an hour and 12 minutes, and people are going to start cursing me for ruining their Sunday and being on too long. So I will shorten all of this up and just thank everyone. Make sure there's no one else. And just and just say, it's very important what Lori said. We depend on Europe as a consumer of our goods and services, and we're destroying that. We depend on China to buy our stuff. We've got a market for 1.4 trillion. We depend on their industrial power to make our stuff, and we're making enemies with them, and we're going to pay a price in the same way that Europe is committing economic suicide at our behest. We're doing the same thing for ourselves. So, it is what it is. Again, the lack of leadership, or the deliberate creation of a feckless but compliant leadership class, ruling elite class, has created this environment, and it's getting exactly what you'd expect it to get. Thanks a lot, everybody. A couple of things. Please, if you can do anything to help the channel, the big thing is if you can join Rockfin, ROKFIN. There's two ways for those. Thanks for everybody that's on it. There's two things you can do. You can become a member. It's free of charge. Become a member. You can see everything that I do except for one show a week, my premium show. That's every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. I do a weekly update with Scott Ritter. That's the premium show. You have to pay the $9.99 a month to be a premium member to see that show. The rest of it is all free. And so if you can't afford the $9.99 a month, don't even worry about it. I certainly appreciate it. You'll see all of my stuff except for the Scott Ritter Show. $9.99 a month. I really appreciate those can do it, who can do it. It really helps to have the members on Rockfin. So that's rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. Please, at minimum, become a free member. You'll get almost everything I do. If you can afford the $9.99 a month, it's greatly appreciated. That helps to strengthen the channel. That helps to build the channel. Also, so make sure you smash the like button on this, share it with all your friends on your all your social networks. If you can become a Patreon member, that's greatly appreciated. Patreon.com/Garland Nixon. $5, $10, $100 a month, whatever you can afford. I don't care what it is. I certainly appreciate it. Buy me a coffee always works. People like to do that because, some people don't like PayPal. They're like, PayPal's evil. Can't argue with that. But if you can help however you can. But buymeacoffee.com/Garland in, and then for some reason they stuck a friggin' H after my name. I don't know. But at any rate, there's all the things, the ways you can help the channel, and I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, your week, your month, etc. Hopefully I'm giving people some information that will help people to understand things, at least to have a broader conversation, and maybe to look at things in a little bit more positive light. At any rate, thanks a lot, everybody. And let me just make sure one more time, if there's super chats, I really don't want to miss anyone who did a super chat. There we go. And I almost did. Sparky, sorry I was late today. I can't miss Sparky. I can never miss Sparky. Who's this? Salty Texas Trucker says, it would appear the same gift being used on Europe is being grift. I'm sure he says is being ran on the American people. You are 100% right, Salty Texas Trucker. How about this? Love your work. The truth will out. Thanks a lot, Chris Cox. And I think that is that. I think I've gotten all my super chats. Yeah, that's it. Thanks a lot, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. That should be the last one. Emery Chan. Yes, it is. And I think that's it. I don't think I missed anybody. Let me just check. Did I miss anybody? Ping Chow received. Thanks a lot, Ping Chow. And that's everybody. Hearn 87. Thanks a lot, Hearn 87. Minax Kajitum. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Enjoy your day and share. And if you can help to support the channel, that's greatly appreciated. And make sure, go to YouTube, and make sure you click the little bell so that you'll be notified, ideally, hopefully. But please go to Rockfin and become either a member or a subscriber, whatever you can afford. If you can't afford to become a subscriber for $9.99 a month, that's cool. I would appreciate it if you can do it to help the channel. Peace. And don't forget, there's lots of wonderful channels out here. There's the Duran, there's the New Atlas, I like Jimmy Dore. I enjoy Jimmy Dore. He does a lot of good stuff. There's Andre Martinyov. I mean, there's just so many. I'd be forever naming them all, but there's a lot of great people out here. There's a lot of great work being done. Certainly appreciate that. And I recommend that you go check out all of that stuff. Peace. I am out.